It was a little past midnight when my phone rang, its sharp tone piercing the silence of my living room. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Hesitating for a second, I answered, expecting a wrong number or some late-night telemarketer. "Hello?" I muttered, my voice groggy from nearly dozing off. At first, there was no response, just a faint static hum. I was about to hang up when I heard a soft voice on the other end, barely a whisper. "Is someone there?" The voice was unsettling, a mix of desperation and confusion. It sounded like a woman, though it was hard to tell through the crackling line. I figured it must be a wrong number. "You've got the wrong number," I said, hanging up before they could respond. I set the phone back on the coffee table, shaking my head and trying to shake off the eerie feeling the call left behind. A few moments passed, and just as I started drifting off again, the phone rang. Same number. Unknown. I sighed, answering again, this time more annoyed than anything. "Who is this?" The same whisper, the same question. "Is someone there?" A chill ran down my spine. This time I hesitated. There was something in the way the voice lingered, as though it wasn't really asking if someone was there, it was stating it. "Look, stop calling me," I said firmly. But before I could hang up, the voice changed. "I know you," the voice whispered, a hint of menace creeping in. "You live at 34 Elm Street, right?" My heart skipped a beat. How did they know my address? "What the hell? Who is this?" I demanded, feeling a surge of fear mixed with anger. Silence. Then the whisper returned, but more frantic now. "Is someone there? Please answer me. I'm outside." I froze. My eyes darted toward the window. The curtains were drawn, but suddenly I became painfully aware of how quiet the night had become. No hum of passing cars, no rustle of wind, just an oppressive stillness. "They can see you," the voice continued, breathless now. "They're just outside the house." I leapt up from the couch, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. I rushed to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peek outside. The street was empty. No cars, no people, just the dim glow of the streetlights casting long, eerie shadows across the sidewalk. No one was there. "This isn't funny," I said, my voice trembling now. "Whoever you are, leave me alone." The voice shifted, as if whoever was on the other end could sense my fear. "You should check the front door. It's unlocked." I froze in place. My front door was unlocked. I hadn't bothered to lock it since I got home. My pulse quickened, and I felt a bead of sweat run down the back of my neck. "I'm calling the police," I threatened, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. "Don't bother," the voice replied, eerily calm now. "By the time they arrive, it'll be too late." I ran to the door, double-checking the lock. My hands were shaking, but I managed to twist the deadbolt into place. I backed away slowly, the phone still pressed to my ear, as if expecting the voice to continue. But there was only silence on the other end now. I ended the call and immediately dialed the police. As the phone rang, I paced around the living room, stealing glances at the windows and front door. After what felt like an eternity, the dispatcher answered. I explained what had happened, my voice shaky, trying to convince myself that it was probably just a prank. "We'll send a patrol car to check the area," the dispatcher said, her tone professional but distant, like this was just another routine call. I thanked her and hung up, but the unease remained. I sat back down on the couch, phone still in hand, waiting for the sound of the police arriving, but the minutes dragged on in silence, each one amplifying the tension that hung in the air. Then, the phone rang again. Unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering, dread creeping over me. The whisper returned, this time barely audible but unmistakable. "I told you," the voice hissed. "I'm just outside." With trembling hands, I looked toward the front door, half expecting it to swing open. The door stayed shut, but the fear that gripped me now was overwhelming. As I sat there, paralyzed, a soft knock echoed from the front door. I stood frozen, heart pounding in my chest. My phone slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a soft thud. The knock came again, louder this time. And then, silence. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because I had stayed up late, working on some edits for a video. My phone buzzed beside me, the screen lighting up with a call from blocked number. I glanced at the clock, 3:33 a.m. Odd. I answered out of curiosity. Hello? No response. Just silence, followed by what sounded like faint breathing. I waited for a moment, then hung up, assuming it was a prank or maybe a robocall gone wrong. I didn't think much of it and went back to work. The next night, it happened again. Blocked number. Same time, 3:33 a.m. This time I was already in bed, the house dark and still. I answered, already irritated. Who is this? Again, nothing. Just that same eerie breathing, the kind that makes your skin crawl, like someone was just on the other side of the line, listening to me, but unwilling to speak. I hung up again, more annoyed than scared, but it left me with a strange uneasiness that lingered as I tried to fall asleep. By the third night, I was on edge. 3:33 a.m., right on schedule. My phone buzzed beside me. Blocked number. I didn't answer this time, just stared at the screen until the call went to voicemail. But even when I didn't answer, the silence felt heavy, like something was waiting, hanging in the air around me. Over the next few days, the calls continued. Always at the same time, always from a blocked number. The breathing never changed, and after a while, I stopped answering altogether. It became part of my nightly routine. Wake up at 3:33 a.m., see the call, ignore it, try to go back to sleep. But one night, after about a week of this, something changed. The phone rang at the usual time, and I let it go to voicemail. But this time, I felt an odd compulsion to listen to the message. I tapped the voicemail icon, bringing the phone to my ear. At first, it was just the usual breathing, slow and deliberate. But then, mixed in with the faint sound of someone exhaling, I heard something else. Crying. Soft, distant sobbing, like someone crying far away but close enough to be heard through the receiver. It sent a chill down my spine. I immediately deleted the message. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, trying to rationalize the calls. It had to be some prank, some weird glitch, right? But then came the night that I can never forget. The call came at its usual time, 3:33 a.m. This time, against my better judgment, I answered. I didn't say anything, just held the phone to my ear, listening, breathing, slow, shallow, deliberate. Then the sobbing started again, faint but unmistakable. I was about to hang up when I heard something that made my blood run cold. "Hello?" a voice whispered, barely audible. It was my voice. For a moment I sat there, stunned, the phone trembling in my hand. "What the?" I began. But before I could finish, the voice on the other end repeated my exact words, in my own voice, but warped, distorted, like a recording played back too slow. I hung up, my heart racing. I stared at my phone, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was it some kind of trick? A recording? My voice, repeated back to me. How was that possible? I didn't sleep that night, too paranoid that the phone would ring again. But the next night, it did. 3:33 a.m., the same blocked number. This time, I didn't answer. I let it ring, my stomach churning with dread. When it finally stopped, I waited. And sure enough, a voicemail came through. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I played the message. Again, it was my own voice. But this time, it wasn't just repeating words I had said before. It was responding. "You can't hide," my distorted voice hissed. "I'm already here." I froze, the phone slipping from my hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The house was deathly quiet, the only sound the pounding of my own heart. My eyes darted around the room, scanning the dark corners, the shadows that seemed to stretch and warp in the dim light. Suddenly, I felt it, that eerie sensation of being watched, like someone was in the room with me. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly turned to look behind me. There was no one there, but I could feel it. Something. Like the very air had shifted, grown heavier, as if the silence itself had eyes. I didn't sleep for days after that. The calls stopped, but the feeling never left. Even now, sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake up at 3:33 a.m., expecting the phone to ring again, expecting to hear my own voice whispering from the darkness. It was one of those late nights at the office, the building eerily silent, save for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional click of my keyboard. I had stayed behind to finish up some work, the kind of tedious task that only gets done after hours when everyone else has gone home. The city outside was quiet, and the floor I was on felt deserted. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes, when I heard it, a faint ring. My desk phone was ringing, its shrill sound cutting through the stillness. I glanced at the time. 11:47 p.m. Who could be calling at this hour? I hesitated before picking it up, assuming it might be security or a client. Hello? At first, there was only static, a faint crackling on the line. Then a voice, monotone, robotic, spoke. Leave. Now. I froze. Excuse me? Who is this? The voice repeated, flat and mechanical. Leave. Now. Goosebumps prickled my skin. The voice wasn't familiar. It sounded distorted, almost like it was coming through an old, glitchy system. I glanced around the empty office, feeling suddenly uneasy. The air seemed to thicken. Who is this? I demanded, but the line went dead with a soft click. I stared at the receiver, my hand still hovering over the phone. I checked the display. It showed a local extension I didn't recognize. Curious, I pulled up the office directory, searching for the number. When the result popped up, my stomach dropped. The extension belonged to David Turlow, a colleague who had mysteriously disappeared a few years back. David had vanished one night after work, and no one knew what happened. Officially, he was just gone, and his extension had been disconnected ever since. How could I have received a call from a line that had been dead for years? I dialed the number out of curiosity. The phone rang 3 times, then a sharp, distorted tone filled the line, followed by the same robotic voice. Leave. Now. I slammed the phone down, heart pounding. What was happening? I looked around the office, every shadow seeming more menacing now. I grabbed my jacket, stuffed my things into my bag, and decided it was time to leave. Just as I turned off my computer, the phone rang again. The same extension, David Turlow. This time I didn't answer. I stared at the phone, the ringing echoing in the silence until it stopped. I quickly made my way to the elevator, the unsettling feeling growing with each step. The ringing seemed to follow me as I rushed down the hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, eerie shadows. I stepped into the elevator, jabbing at the ground floor button, desperate to get out. The doors slid closed, but even in the elevator, I could still hear the ringing in my head. When I told a coworker the next day, expecting them to laugh it off, they gave me a serious look. "You're not the first," they whispered. "Others have gotten calls from that line too, always the same message, leave, now." I never stayed late again. Some phone lines are better left disconnected.